It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at Fire the Arquebusiers, number 1. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, a place for everyone that loves classic RPGs and anyone who'd like to learn more about them. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. And today, from 1976, this is Fire the Arquebusiers, number 1. Hope you enjoy the video. Today we're taking a look at Greg Costikyan's Fire the Arquebusiers, number 1. Here's the cover. This is just regular paper. It's been, I think, mimeographed and then maybe photocopied. Mine's 34 pages. I think I'm missing a couple pages there at the end. The article, the last article cuts off. Back in May of this year, I told you we had found issues 2-3. It was a combined double issue, and we did a video on that. And now I'm thrilled that I found the original one. There's just those issues, and then I think, if I understand correctly from some things I've read, they get combined into another fanzine for something that has a new name. I think it's called the Phoenix. Haven't ever seen copies of that. Let's take a look at this. Love this. It's the only art in here. This is fantastic cover drawing of this dragon with like a spiked tail, big fang claws, and there's a little fighter here at the bottom who has like whacked off a couple ends of a couple of the claws, sort of like giving it a pedicure of sorts. Can't really make out the name. There's a name really tiny scribbled at the bottom there, and there's no mention of any art on the inside here. If you remember, this fanzine, Fire the Arquebusiers, is mentioned in the Strategic Review 4, and Gary gives a little bit of a plug here, says it's a minor triumph. And we'll come back because there's a really cool thing in here, which is a letter exchange between Greg and Gary. Here's their table of contents printed in here. He gives you the page numbers and the author from each of those articles. So we have the table of contents and some other information about the fanzine. An editorial, kind of an infamous article called Sex in D&D, the Holy Man, which is a character class, new monsters, some magical spices you can use in your D&D campaign, the Empath, another character class, army combat, which are rules for resolving large-scale combat. Could be like chainmail, miniatures, or could also be using that in D&D. Further limitations upon magic, which is essentially an alternate magic user system with spell points and so forth. Communiques, really interesting exchange between Gary Gygax and Greg Costikyan. As the Nexus Turns, which is a narrative of some of their recent campaign gaming. Current census of Empath, which is just some information about player characters in their home campaign. And If I Could Talk to the Animals, which is a new character class for the Animal Handler. As I mentioned, Greg Costikyan is responsible for this, and contributions Scott Rosenberg, Adam Gilinsky, Gil Neiger, Matthew Diller, Adam Kasanof, and Ben Grossman. Okay, so the first thing we have here is the editor fills space, which is his editorial, which is pretty good stuff. And so here's the beginning. I like this. For millennia, in the darkest caves of Nayuk, orcs and dwarves have slaved over the manuscript you now hold in your hot little hands. Each page has been lovingly inscribed. Each sheet has been mimeographed in the fearsome yet wondrous Mimeo machine. The fearsome Gestetner has issued forth a magazine, and the multitudes rejoice. It's interesting here. He talks about this being typed up in September the 18th, but then on the first page of this, he mentions that it doesn't actually come out, I think, until around November of that year, which is, he says November 22nd, 1975. He also mentions in here some other games and rules that he has that he would be glad to share with people. Has a little quote from the Ilmet and Lankmar book by Fritz Lieber, and mentions that he doesn't generally want to trade this fanzine, but he'd rather have you get subscriptions for this. I think it's 6 issues for $2.50, or 1 issue for 50 cents was the pricing he was looking at. Okay, so he wants to tell you a little bit about his first fanzine, Fire the Arquebusiers. Says this is coming out later than I thought it would get out. I thought it would get out in September. I'm trying to figure out where to send it. I'm sending a copy to Kranor-Ril and to Alarms and Excursions, and I'm hoping that I can get their mailing list so that I can send it out to some other people as well, because obviously he wants contributions as well as subscribers. As he says, this issue, nothing but D&D material, but he does hope that he will get some other material besides D&D material for the fanzine in the future. And like most people who draft up a fanzine, he really hopes that people will participate and send things in to him to be in the fanzine for future issues. He does also say that, in his home campaign, their D&D game is somewhat different with lots of variations from the original rules. He doesn't like the magic items that are in D&D and Greyhawk. He likes unique magic items, and he likes magic items that characters don't know what they are and that they have to figure out through sort of exploration and testing, rather than just like, I've memorized what that magic item is kind of thing. He says he draws a lot of inspiration for his magic items from fiction books that he reads, kind of like that Appendix N type of stuff that Gary mentions in the Dungeon Master's Guide. All right, he also mentions Stephen Tahor, who is another game master in the area. He says he was the best DM in New York, but he moved, and so now Greg says he has become the best dungeon master in there. And he says, people call me all the time with all these questions about how to, what the rules are and how I'm supposed to play D&D. He says, I'm sick of it. I'm not going to do it anymore. But in any event, Stephen Tahor has this fanzine called the Haven Herald. And I managed to pick up a few of those. I'm still trying to get the very first issues of that before I take a look at that one. So a couple other really cool, really, really early days fanzines like this are always a lot of fun, I think. Okay, let's dive into the content. So sex in D&D is, in my opinion, an unnecessary article, but everyone plays their game differently. So you roll D100 to see what your sexual inclination is. You can get an extraordinary roll in 92 to 100, then you drop down to the secondary chart where you might be a sadist, a masochist, a necrophiliac, and have fetishes and stuff like that. Once you figure that stuff out, then you see if you have any type of fixation that you want to throw in there for your character. And you have a sex drive that he would is high. It could be higher or lower, and then that will determine your character's need to have sex every so often, depending on how high or low your sex drive is. Again, I guess you could role play that if you're into it. I don't really think you need charts to make that up, but in any event, that is Greg's idea. That's the article he decided to lead off with. Okay, something a little more typical, the Holy Man. The Holy Man is basically a cleric, and he gets to 5th level or higher, and then the cleric can convert and become a holy man, maybe a holy woman, doesn't say. At which point they won't fight, they won't harm any creatures, including monsters. They'll even allow themselves to be killed rather than kill something else. And they basically have super duper healing abilities. So by level, they can automatically heal a certain number of points every day, and there's a chart that goes up each level, in addition to their spells. They have a chance to be able to convert people that gets higher, and they have an innate ability to do resurrections and raising dead, in addition, again, to any spells that they may have. They will go in any kind of party, because even if they're in a party of people maybe that are chaotic, they will go with the idea that they can convert them over time, so it is something acceptable for them to do. New monsters. First one's the Cursed Paladin, so it's a regular paladin, he's just covered with a curse. And so he has a couple of, it seems like this would be an NPC you could throw into for the party to meet. He will have an 18 or better in strength, and then luck, which is one of the 3 skills that they say they added. I think they added luck, greed, and ego as extra character stats in their home campaign. We either have a magical sword or magic armor to start off with, and but again, he has high strength, high luck, low dexterity. They say except in combat. In combat, he gets like an extra 2d6. He gets only 2 normally. In combat, he gets an extra 2d6 added in, so he gets maybe like a high armor class bonus in there for combat only. And then of course he's cursed, so he's always got bad luck, and so if he becomes part of a party, then bad things are going to happen. Wandering monsters are always going to find them, that kind of thing. And then he has a regular monster, which is the saber-toothed tiger, just a really big tiger that can chomp you, knock you down, that kind of thing. This is a really good article. We've talked in a couple other fanzines that obviously come later about herbs. So this is kind of the earliest iteration of that, probably. I don't know if there's anything earlier in an Alarms and Excursion because I haven't read through all those yet. But it's pretty good. And what he says is, look, these are magical versions of these herbs. They're a totally normal version of these herbs out there that just don't, they just whatever a normal herb would do. These are enchanted. You're normally only going to find one use of this, not going to be labeled probably. And there's none of this sort of like I take a little tongue test and gets a sense of it. He's like, it's all or nothing. You either use it or you don't. You get the benefit or you don't. So you roll first to see which table to go on, and then each table has its own random list. It's actually quite good. I thought it was going to be a little cheesy at first, and then I read it and like, you know what? Actually, this is really good. And it's random stuff. It's not anything that's in the DMG, and so it's got that creativity to it. It could be a really fun thing to add into the campaign. What do we start with? Cannabis, of course. Not really thinking that's a spice, but maybe it's an herb, and that's close enough, right? So the magic cannabis gives you the ability to teleport. You have a 75% chance to teleport to the place you're thinking of, and if you trigger teleportation, you have a 90% chance of getting there successfully. Magic tobacco fills up a 10 by 10 smoke area, causes coughing, inability to fight because you can't see, can't breathe well. And a magic user gets the ability to control where that goes, so that's kind of like Gandalf. That's kind of cool. Garlic. And have how you consume it. So like the first two you would smoke. Garlic you have to chew. If you chew the magic garlic, you will then be able to spit a stream of acid up to 10 feet away. 75% chance to hit what you aim at, and you can do some damage from the acid. Enchanted salt you sprinkle on anything that's a bloodsucker, like a giant leech or whatever, and it will fall off and die. Mustard has to be either eaten, and it gives some healing abilities, or mixed with holy water, and then becomes a paste, and you can rub it onto wounds. In both cases, it'll do some healing. Enchanted coffee or tea, when consumed, gives you 3 times the normal length of time before you need to rest. Right? That's a great, sort of really clever, very small magic item, right? But would be something of value if you're playing in a campaign where your DM actually makes you rest every evening. Yeast will help you levitate. Magic bubblegum will pop and deafen people's ears, or can be used to stick to something and adhere up to 1,700 gold pieces of weight. Carrots, enchanted carrots, give you infravision. Horseradish polymorphs you into some type of equine, which is just kind of funny. Red pepper enables you to breathe fire, like a fire-breathing dragon breath, just one time. Mint lets you breathe an icy cold, refreshing, right? Cold breath weapon. It goes on and on. It's really, really good. And I said, thought it was going to be a little cheesy, but I actually find it to be quite good. Okay. Empaths, another new character. This character class, is empathetic. This is reprinted from the Haven Herald. This is Gil Neiger's contribution. And they can link nervous systems. And I guess they say you want to have a low ego to be a good empath. Is kind of how it works. It seems a little hard to sort, but he explains it. And the weird thing is the empath can actually absorb wounds from other characters. Obviously, they'll only do that with people they know and like most of the time. But they can absorb wounds, and they can also heal themselves. So it's sort of like they become a sponge for the party's damage, right? Absorbing wounds, one person per round, but they absorb wounds and they can instantly start to heal themselves, so they can sort of like soak a lot of hit points. It's interesting. A little poetry. Images upon my screen flicker brightly in between the words of man and human machine. You wonder why I want to scan my scanner. Thoughts that never screen alike, clicking loudly in the night. All that's left is turned to right, now evermore to find a fonder flavor. Living where the darkness dwells, deafened by the silent hells, laughter is like crystal bells shattered bright across the selfish sharing. You seem to be reflections of me, all I could see, and I looked back at you. There you go, random. He has a lot of these little random things tucked at the bottom for like space fillers. You get quotes from books like the Elric Saga and stuff like that. This article is on Army Combat. It's 4 pages long. It's for me, it's basically miniatures rules, but again, it's obviously intended you could also use this for D&D combat as well. This is interesting. Further limitations on magic. So this is his, again, very popular idea. That's probably like one of the most often revised rules was magic use. And like a lot of people who thinks magic users is too weak, he doesn't like this one spell and you're done for the day kind of thing. So his is essentially a mana or spell point system, right? You get a certain number of spell points. And so let me click over to that. So the magic user at first level has 5 spell points. And then what he does, is, goes through every spell and gives it spell points. So in his system, ventriloquism's 1 spell point, hold portals 2, read magic is 3, protection from evil is 2, light is 2, charm person and sleep are 5. Remember, this is magic missile is 3, shield is 3. So you can cast 2 or 3 spells probably in a day before you have to rest and regain your spell points or your mana. He just calls them spell points. He does that with every level, and it's again the interesting thing. Sometimes you have a 5th level spell, which is apparently not that powerful, so its spell point usage is the same as some 2nd level spells. That's just kind of one of the things you have to do. And like a lot of people, so like Fireball and Lightning Bolt, those are the highest spell points for the 3rd level spells. You start with 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 65, 80. You just get more spell points. Now, that's how many spell points you can use in a day, but then the level of spell you can use is the same as the normal D&D rules, right? So you got to be 5th level magic user before you can use any 3rd level spell in his game as well. He uses intelligence. He says you can learn all spells. He doesn't like this percentage roll, but how long it takes, first you have to find it, get a magic user to teach you or find a scroll to learn it from, and then your intelligence determines how long it takes you to learn it. Anywhere from a week if you're with intelligence that's actually too low to be a magic user, up to an 18. It only takes you half of a dungeon turn, so I think that means 5 rounds. And he also has this thing, if you get an 18, he wants you to roll then, like you do for strength, percentile dice on top of that. You can be even like, so you could have 18, 00 intelligence in his game as well. Your high intelligence is also going to give you a spell point boost in terms of how many spell points you get per day as well. And then maximum number of spells you can learn at each level based on how intelligent you are. It's a pretty good system. I like all these ideas. I don't have any firm rule most of the time when I play. I use the traditional rules, but I'm often tempted to try and play around and learn which of these spell point systems I like better, because in my gut it feels like I prefer that as well. Here's a spell or two to fill the pages, and actually some good new spells. Protection from sleep, which is the counter to the 1st level power spell, right? Sleep. And then he's got a little dexterity comparison. You get a bonus to see who gets their spell off first if you can try and get this spell off before the guy casts sleep on your party. Then he's got this thing called spinning disc. It's a 5th level spell. You have to buy some kind of disc, and this will cause it to float and spin. He's got another one here that's called Brainwash Sword, that allows a magic user to sort of overcome the ego of an intelligent enchanted sword and gain control over it. He's got a clerical spell called Age. It'll add 2d6 years to someone's life, which, as he says, big deal to a human being, not a huge deal to a dragon. And then a 7th level spell called Convert gives you a chance to convert people. You have to be able to speak out loud. They have to be able to have an intelligence to understand, well, 1, understand the language, and 2, process what you're saying. So you can't talk to, probably a toad, right? But you could talk to orcs if you could speak in Orcish or they knew Common. And you can try to convert them. Now, they got to not kill you while you're doing that, but in any event, that's what the spell is. And then Appeal to God is the ability to appeal to your deity as a 6th level spell. And here's what it'll do. Increase the luck of all party members by 3 points, because remember that's a stat. Enable all members to hear noise 1 to 4, open doors 1 to 4, disrupt any chaotic opposite alignment, being that you encounter by command. The cleric can yell a command and sort of cause them to stop or something like that. And then blast holes through rocks so you can get away in case of a cave-in. You can only cast it, I think it says once a year, by a particular cleric. So there you go. All right, really cool little article here. It's a page and a half. this is actual back and forth between Gary and Greg. So this starts off with a letter. Greg has obviously written to him and asked whether or not it's okay for him to have a fanzine that covers D&D material. He says, thanks. This is from September 10th. Thanks for your letter. I noticed D&D has gained considerable popularity within diplomacy fans, which is natural. D&D is great face-to-face play. Dippy is about the best postal game there is. This is a nice mix, nice combo. If you look at Strategic Review number 4, it comes out next month, you'll note there are 2 D&D fanzines now, but that's no reason not to come out with another one. You certainly have our permission. We will offer what support we can. As to the material you plan, Blackmore will cover combat pretty thoroughly, and the supplement after it, which will be by me, which is Elder Twitterly, will get into psionics pretty thoroughly with 3 classes that use mental powers to some extent. This is not a drawback, for comparisons are always useful and interesting. I will plug your zines and the upcoming D&D fanzines in Strategic Review number 4. If you have questions and need anything, fire off a line. Can't say how quickly I'll answer. I'm buried in work, but I'll do my best. He sort of adds at the end, have you seen Empire of the Petal Throne? Interesting to listen to this. The system is based on D&D, but the setting and the structure are both different and superior. Gary doesn't tend to stick with that opinion for long, right? Pretty soon D&D becomes the prominent product. War of Wizards is its companion by the by. EPT is a natural partner with D&D. You may deal with it if you wish. Followed around long enough, got to sign off. Okay, so then he writes back, open letter here in the fanzine. I've seen EPT, I don't particularly like it. It's a massive undertaking. I praise the effort, but I like to invent my own worlds. I don't like various and sundry psionic classes I have seen. I like heroic fantasy, not some 50s potboiler sci-fi novel. I stick with magic. And the reason I wrote is I know some people in some sort of IP intellectual property have tried to sort of choke off anybody using it. And he talks about how the Marvel and DC didn't want anyone creating sort of amateur comics, whereas Star Trek encouraged it, and he says he really thinks that helped Star Trek fandom explode. All right, then he has his note back to Gary. I see the most recent issue of TSR says Blackmore has been issued. I've heard the rumor that came up with this particular person, Gordon Anderson. He goes on, he doesn't really like him. And then he gets an answer back from Gary right before he went to press, and he says, so he writes back and said it absolutely was not printed by this guy. And he's got some, Greg had some choice words about this guy, and he underlines them. And Gary says basically, I agree, that's the same reputation, that I think he has as well. And, we try to really work with good people that support our hobby whenever TSR is going to contract out any kind of work, including just like printing. And so he says, absolutely not. This guy's not involved in any way whatsoever. So Greg feels good about that. So this is just a little story of their recent campaign. It's really, really fun. They give the names of their different characters, like Greg's character is Cheech the Wizard. And they have this, they're walking down the corridor, they encounter this beholder, which freaks them out because that's a powerful monster, right? But then someone, I think is an empath, and says they could get a reading on it and is interested. It's a female beholder and it's interested in having sex with somebody. A la back to sex in D&D. And so they have a conversation where someone's like, hey, somebody should step up and take one for the team. No one wants to do that. So then this one guy's like, all right, well, I'll pretend I'm going to go hook up with this beholder and distract her, get her, and then you guys just charge in and attack, right? So he does that. They have a couple martial artists in here, and so they come flying in with nunchucks and kicks and whatever, and they kind of stun the beholder, and they run away and spike a door and escape from that. And then they come around the corner, and there's this giant black pudding. This guy whips out his whipped cream and puts it on top of the black pudding, and he just starts eating it. And they sort of sit around to say, wait a minute, I think it's going to kill him. He eats that black pudding. And that's the end. And so he's got his little tagline here, will the black pudding kill them all? How has the beholder satiated itself? What other fiendishness will the party discover in the corridors of the dungeon? Da, 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 da. So more to come, except for there isn't. But it was kind of fun to read. Here is Greg's, he calls it his census, which is essentially just a list of different people in his home campaign, name, character class, magic items. There's a guy here who's like a blink dog, and he's the major of like the Union Local 727 Blink Dog Pack, has 121 blink dogs that run with him. I don't know. It was kind of silly, but I thought it was fun. If I Could Talk to the Animals is an article by Greg he says in his world he has all animals have this sort of like elemental or like deity. So like felines, right, would have one, and that deity can come down and sort of touch somebody and say, hey, you're predisposed, you're animal friendly, whatever. I'm going to let you be an animal trainer, and then you can get these abilities. It's a character class. As you go up in level, you gain the ability to train different types of animals. So it's not like you don't pick one, right? You could do cats and horses and rodents and birds of prey, and then it goes through like enchanted monsters like chimeras and Pegasus and unicorns and all that kind of stuff. So it's just character class. This is the last article. That's the one where I said I think it ends because it didn't get done talking about all the different things you could try to learn how to train. But it's sort of like, I think like a druid version of that, right? But it has not just sort of woodland animals, but all sort of fantastical creatures are covered by his version of the animal trainer. That is our look at Fire the Arquebusiers #1. Really excited to be able to share this with you guys. I was so excited to be able to pick this up because it's a super, super rare early fanzine. Not very many of these things floating around out there anymore, I imagine. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I hope you're enjoying our series, and I hope you're subscribed. If you have friends who might enjoy our content, please send them our way, and hopefully they'll be subscribers as well. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.